So you want a little more FPS in your favorite games, or you're looking for a more efficient and quiet system with your RTX 5000 series graphics card. I'll show you how to optimize your GPU for your PC and your use case, and then give you some graphs at the end so you can make a more informed decision on your power limit. For this tutorial I'll be using MSI Afterburner, which I've been using for years now on AMD and Nvidia GPUs. You should be able to follow the tutorial if you already have a different overclocking tool installed, since it's more or less the same procedure. The main goal of undervolting and overclocking is to get the highest clock speed at the lowest voltage possible. To test if your increased clocks are stable, I recommend you try to play a variety of games, do some usual work on your PC, and just use stress tests like Vermark for example. Before we overclock anything, we should increase our power limit to the highest value first. Now we want to increase memory clocks and core clocks. For memory I recommend starting at around plus 500 MHz and plus 100 MHz for your core clocks. You should monitor your actual clocks when in-game to check if your settings in Afterburner are really changing something. Now you test if your system is stable and then increase the clocks until you see artifacts or whole game crashes. Set your core clock speed to the last stable setting. The last stable overclock for my RTX 5080 was plus 800 MHz on the memory and plus 250 MHz on the core. The last thing we want to control now is the power limit. I will now show you the performance graphs I get at a 70%, 100% and 125% power limit, and if the increase in power draw is even worth it. After you've settled on your overclock, just make sure your settings are applied at startup. With Afterburner you just click on this Windows 11 symbol and you're done. This is the base performance at stock in the built-in Cyberpunk 2077 benchmark. Here we draw an average of 344 watts on the GPU and get an average frame rate of 63. The 1% lows are at 57 FPS. For comparison, after the undervolt and overclock, at the same power limit we draw an average of 355 watts, so 3% more. In return we increase our average FPS by 3 frames or 5% and our 1% lows by 4 FPS or 7%. In this case we get a higher efficiency with more FPS per watt. This is the most extreme example with a 125% power limit. We get an average power draw of 381 watts, but our average FPS and 1% lows only increase by 1 frame per second. That is a 1.5% increase for 7% more power. Now we have thrown away the efficiency gains we got from tweaking our clocks out of the window. A 70% power limit does the exact opposite. We are now locked at 252 watts, and comparing that to the 125% power limit, we decrease power draw by 33% while only losing 12% in FPS. The performance difference between our stock profile and this heavily power limited one is much smaller. Now we draw 27% less power for a 7% FPS decrease. If you have a small form factor build, then this configuration might make a lot of sense when your cooling budget is tight and you don't mind losing a bit of performance for significantly less power draw. If you don't care about thermals or heat output and want the most performance, then just go for it, but I recommend going for the more sensible choice of optimizing your clocks but leaving your power limit at 100%. With Counter-Strike 2 we have a very CPU bound game that can profit a little bit from our optimization. At stock we get a power draw of around 225 watts at a 671 FPS average and 312 FPS for 1% lows, and we are not even reaching the 70% power limit. After optimizing we get slightly higher numbers across the board, 4% more power for 3% more average FPS and 1% more for our last percentile. This is what we can expect with competitive shooters that are bottlenecked by the CPU. At a 125% power limit our power draw increases again by 6 watts or 2.5%, but we gain an additional 3% increase in 1% lows, and in these types of games having higher 1% lows is definitely worth a few watts. You want to avoid going below your monitor's refresh rate when the most action is happening in-game. Since we are barely power limited, locking our power to 70% doesn't really change much and performance is nearly identical to stock. So what can we take from this? If you mainly play AAA titles, optimizing your clocks is definitely worth it, but going beyond the default power limit will give you a very small increase in performance. If you have cooling constraints, consider dropping your power limit to a lower value for a pretty good compromise. If you mainly play competitive shooters, then following this tutorial might increase your power draw a tiny bit, but in turn will increase your 1% loss. I hope this video was helpful, and if you have a Ryzen 9000 series CPU, I have made another optimization video for that, along with a PC build video of this very PC. Thank you and auf Wiedersehen.